Hi everyone, so it's reflection month and I've got here a rather lovely photo. I'll just move that light a bit so you can see it better. A lovely photo of the Athabasca River near Jasper, and it's these beautiful reflections here I'm going for. I'll put the photo up on the Patreon site for you so you can download it, and I'll try and put a little inset in at various times in the actual video for you. So right now what I'm trying to decide is what paper to use, what colour, and we all know that colour is really important, the colour of the background that you choose. The colour I really wanted has been taken by my class on Friday. I always take a lot of paper along and they just buy it at cost from me. So I wanted, there's a little mauvey violet one in between that I really wanted, so I'm going to choose between these two. This is a sort of it's called rose grey. It's a art spectrum paper, colour fixed paper, and it's very lovely. It's quite light, and so then I've got this aubergine or elephant. I think this one's called elephant, and it's darker, but it's still in that sort of purpley mauve tone. And what I am actually going to go for in this one is the darker one. There's quite a lot of darks in there. I think that will help establish the darks. The lighter one will probably give me the mountains much better, but I am going to go for the dark there. So I've made my decision about the paper. I'll just attach it to the board. I'll move this one away, and I'm just going to attach it with some delicate masking tape. So the reason I'm using the delicate is if I want to preserve that nice clean edge there, then I need to put some tape over it. If I put normal masking tape, it will just pull off, often pull off a bit of the grit on there. I'm going to actually just tape it all the way down, and then it will stay nice and firm for me. I'm taping it onto a core flute board. Sometimes I use core flute, sometimes I use foam core, sometimes I use a wooden board. And I don't get too worried about the padding. I know when I first started, all the little books and instructions that I found said to pad it with some layers of newspaper. And the only real difference for me if I do that is it doesn't make quite so much noise when I'm jabbing away on the paper. If it's a very thin paper, like the My Tense honeycomb textured paper, which doesn't have the grit on, then a bit of padding is useful. The foam core has a lot of give, core flute doesn't, and like I've said in the past, if you're using core flute, it's got those little corrugations in it. If you haven't got a thick paper, it's going to show through as a pattern on your finished painting. So always remember, if you've got a thin paper, you go and you're using core flute or cardboard, which one of my students did, you need to pad that so that you don't get the corrugation showing through in your finished painting. So now I'm all set to go. I'm going to just use my tablet. I like to use my tablet for the reference because it gives me really great accurate colour. So I'll be using that, but I'll put a photo up for you. Down here, just let me swivel and show you. Down here I have my set of my own mixed pastels that I make up out of other sets that I have. That's my go-to box when I'm starting most paintings. But sometimes when I'm demonstrating, I'll use a particular set so that you can see what you can achieve with a particular set, and it's quite helpful sometimes for that. I'm going to sketch up the outline now, and I'm going to use for that just a Conte. I've got my little dust catch underneath it, so do remember to be safe in the studio. And now I'm just going to sketch in the main shapes, and I'm going to use something, I think I'll just use a blue because it will work for those mountains up there as well. So thinking about the main shapes, I'll just put those in and then I can work back into them and adjust them as I need to. This is just an idea of the shapes. So you could use some thumbnails for this part if you want to work out your composition. So roughly got the mountains in the background. This one sort of comes down. There's a kind of waterfall bit coming down there. That one's coming down like so. And then there's another steep sort of hill coming down like that. And then I want to just establish where the river comes in at the back. So I'm going to pop that across. Down here, there's a lot of trees coming up, so they're just going to go in, whoops, roughly the rough outline of that. So I know where it is, and then the shape of the river as it comes through. It's very flat across here, and then it curves around. And then comes back this way. That's river back there. There's another. I think that's too high. I've kind of worked out that that's too high for the river, and it goes back in a sort of curve through there and then round like that. And there's a headland coming down here that juts out into the river, and then more trees there. So that's the basic idea of the main shapes that are going to go in. That's the first part. Just block in the main outlines, and now I'm going to start working from the sky down. I've got my dust catch down the bottom so that I can catch the dust and not spread it around the studio. I've my pastels next to me. I have some paper for just wiping my hands off because I left my apron at art class, so I know I'm going to get filthy, so you just watch me get it all over my face, my clothes and everything. This is a painting top, so it doesn't matter. All set to go. I'm going to start at the sky, working my way down. I don't have as much sky in here as I do have in the photo, but that's okay. I really wanted to get in the river and the reflections. That's what I'm going to be concentrating on. Let's just zoom back in on that for you. And we'll be starting with the sky. Goodness, my pastel box needs a real clean up. Never mind. I'll be starting up the top and just putting in a bright blue in patches there, right across the sky. Some little bits of it, and it comes right down here. So that will go right across. I want to darken that up a bit because it's quite deep at the top, so I'm just going over with another blue. And then back in with this blue, and it just does its own blending there. I don't really need to do much more than layer a couple of soft pastels over that aubergine colour, and there I've got the sky in. I need it to be a little bit lighter as it comes down. So I'm just lightening it off as it comes down here. And if you don't have the right value in your box, don't worry. Here I must have put my light sky blue in another box, one of my students did. So what I'm doing is just taking a blue that is light enough, putting that in, and then I'll take another blue and just lightly go over it. And they'll just blend themselves together to the right sort of shade of blue. I'm not worried so much about getting leaving the cloud spaces exactly, and that's because I don't want the clouds to be totally white anyway. So if they mix with some of this blue behind them, that's all to the better. I'm going to put a little bit of light down there by using a very pale yellowy kind of colour, just to give it a little bit of sense of light down there. It does give it a slight green tinge, but it really helps with that sense of light as you come towards horizon. So I've added a little bit of light in there. Now I'm going to start working on the clouds, and the clouds are going to be pale blues, pale mauves, pale pinks. So if you have a light box, by which I mean a set of lights from one of the makers, brands, you can pop those out, or you can just go with whatever you've got. So just moving it in circular shapes around there. And over this side as well, and laying in those colours, those patches of cloud colour, which I'll be doing quite a bit of blending with because I want them to be quite soft. More here. Don't forget to watch out for which direction your light's coming in from, because that's going to affect where you're putting the highlights. So the light is coming in from that direction, hitting the clouds, and there'll be shadows on the mountain this way from those clouds up there as well. The valley's in a bit more shade. When I'm putting in this sky, I'm actually going to be taking some of the sky colours that I've used and dropping them down into the reflection area. Just a couple of them. And so the sky reflections are generally a little bit darker than the sky itself. So I'm just making them slightly darker here. Than the sky. And I might just keep readjusting those as I go till I get the value that I want. But that's some of my sky reflection. You can see I'm just pulling it down and right to the edge of the sky there, of the river there. So that's the start of my reflections. I'm working back into these with my soft pastels. And I'm going to want a little, you can see as I drag it across there, I'm picking up the blue from the sky, and that's helping with correcting that the too lightness of the pastel I've used at the beginning, just by mixing with the pastel, by dragging it across, picking up some of the blues and making it mix in a bit. And the same here when I just put my pastel on the paper, jiggle it around and pull it back into the main body of the cloud. It makes that nice wispy edge to the cloud there. So I'm starting to get a little bit of variation depending on how much pressure I put on. It influences how much of the under blues I'm picking up there. I want it to be a little bit darker in there too. So I'm just going for some warmer greys in there. This is a sort of a pinky grey, but it's a little bit deeper value, and just adding those colours in so that I've got some variation in my clouds, a little bit of interest there. Some dark shadows on the bottom, a bit of warmth, and I'm going to put some much lighter bits on the sunlit side in just a moment. So just adding in those little bits of wispy cloud. And again, I don't really try and absolutely duplicate the sky that I'm seeing. I'm more interested in just getting a feeling for the sky and not worrying about having all the cloud shapes be exactly like they are in the reference. I find that tedious and lacking in imagination if I've got to always be slavishly following the clouds that are in the sky. I do realise that there are sometimes when you might want to do that. So I'm not saying don't ever do it, but I'm just saying my general take on that is just to let the clouds develop as they do. paying attention to where the sun's coming from. Just looking for a more purple, a sort of darker value there, just for those bits of the clouds there that are really in shadow. Just the bases of the clouds. And some of the shadows at the back. And then you've seen that the pastel blends it in, but you can also just give it a little push around with your finger, or a shape blender, whatever way you like to blend. I like using my finger, but some people really don't, and that's fine too. And you can see as I pull my finger across the sky there, I pick up bits of the cloud colour that I put in and make them very wispy. And that's good. I'm just blending those edges a little bit there with my finger. Don't want the sky too blended, but I'd like the clouds a little bit more blended. If I'm doing a very big painting, I'll just use the palm of my hand here, the side of my hand, to move the clouds around like so. You can get lovely soft effects doing that as well. So I've got some nice soft clouds there, but they do need a bit of warmth on them from the sun. I'm just looking for my warm white. I think I'll just have to get my light box out now. So again, that's my unison light set, and lots of lights there. So I'm just going to choose a sort of warm one to put in where the sun light is hitting the edge of those clouds and warming them up a bit. There we go, some nice warm highlights on those clouds. I can even step it up a little bit if I want to, by making them even warmer. So now I have some interest in the sky, and that's pretty much done. Because I've been working on those clouds, I'm now just going to drop in a little bit of the cloud colour down here too, and that'll be in the cools and the warms as well, just to drop in those clouds. And I'm giving them a little blended look there. I'm just blending with my finger to get that nice softness. Reflections are soft, so I've pulled them all down and then I'm just blending them down with my finger because they have soft edges. There'll be a bit more cloud coming in over here, and it all just gets a nice little blend with my finger. So we're starting to see the reflections, and you can see that I build them up at the same time as I do the rest of the painting, and that way I keep a sort of harmony between them. I want to put in the mountains now, so we'll start in with those. Let's take a bit of a Conte stick to start with to get the main shapes in, block the main colours in. Colour blocks, and then we'll work from there. And those mountains have nice crisp edges. So I'm putting those in, and I might go back and crisp those up later on with maybe some coloured pencils, pastel pencils. We'll see how we go. They might not need it, because painting is all about the reflection, so I might not worry too much about what else is going on there. So that's the start of the mountains. As it comes over here, it gets darker, and I'm changing over to a darker, deeper blue Conte, and that comes through here. Just again blocking in the main value shapes there to start giving me an idea of the mountains. I've changed over to a greener colour here to block in some of this. As it comes down, it becomes a bit greener. It's also got a bit of a warm colour in there, because the trees here, the pines, have a bit of a disease at the moment, sadly, which is making them look slightly autumnal, even though it's winter. Sorry, summer. Early summer, but they have got that some warm colours in them. So I'm just using this to block in the start of, and in fact, that background colour is helping with that disease that they've got. Up here, I'm going back to the pale colour. To block in some shapes there. And I really need to pull those clouds down a little bit more here. So I'm just going to knock all that out a little bit. The beauty of clouds is, and I can just move them around wherever I like. So I'm just making a little bit more of a cloud set there. Maybe get a little bit of a base there. And then I'll work back into that. I'm actually using a pink here, as you can see. There's a sort of pink overtones in this, and just using it at this stage, and then I'll correct for it by going back over it with the blue, just to give me the sort of edge that I want, a nice sort of glowing edge there. And then I just pull it down in the direction that the rock formations are taking. And then some quite deep shadows going over here, and I'm going to use the blue to pop those in a minute. I've got that all wrong. It needs to come up higher, so let's use the blue for that, because it's in shadow there. And it has a, it's just going down there. and just blocking in, as I said, some of those shapes. And we're working up that. And I'm just using the pastel Conte in the direction that the landscape is going. I'm going to just chisel off a bit of that mountaintop in the cloud again. Okay, so there are the mountains. They've got the shadow suggestions of the shadows in there, which I can modify as I go. And some more suggestions of shadows and edges along here, which I'm pulling down with the hard pastel. I will be doing some more work on those mountains, but for the time being, they're going to be, well, I'm going to be leaving them as they are. And then I'll be going into, now I'll be going into this area here and just putting in some of those warmer colours I talked about that are from the pine disease, and they're just dropping in a little bit of warmth in there. Pulling them in the direction that things are growing. It also has quite a lot of purple up in there. It's like a heathery cover, a heather colour, the colour of heather. So it's sort of a maroon actually. So that's why I'm putting down that reddy colour, sienna colour, and then I'm going back, working back into it, over it with the purple, and that's giving me the colour that I wanted, which I just didn't have to hand. A little bit of it going into here as well, just so it's not quite so red, but it's building up the colour that I want. On this part of it, we see mountain reflections coming down, so I'm going to be working some of those deep blues of the reflections of the mountain back into here. So some of them are pulling down in that wedge shape, so I'm just going to pull it back in the wedge shape so I can get this wedge shape, and then I'm going to give some of that downward. And then it's got the lighter colour above it, so I'm going into it with the lighter colours of the mountain, and I'll be adding a little bit of that pink colour in. Remember I said it's got that pinky purple look, so I'll be taking a little bit of the pink in there and a bit of purple. And above it's going to be meeting a little bit further down it. It'll be meeting the clouds, but first I want to put in some of that mountain colour. So I'm just making the reflections kind of mirror it in a way, but not exactly, to lay in the bones of this. There's a much brighter green part coming across there of some of those trees, so I'm going to be working on putting a greener, brighter bit of tree line across there. Give it a little bit of up and down jiggle. there'll be a darker green in behind it. So I'm going in with some darker greens in behind there. And I'm working some of this darker green back into the other green so that I've got a variety of greens coming down in the forest. We don't want the same green everywhere. And then working my hard conte back over the top of it again. And bringing some of those trees and reflections, trees and shadows up into this part of the mountain as well. Just working some rocks back into there. Those rocks are sort of mauvey coloured, so I'm just taking a little mauve softer pastel and putting in some dabs of rock there. And they're going to go over this one over here too. Just pulling it down into this area. And I'm adding it in again over here. You can see it's very effective just dragging it over those shadowed areas, and then it helps to blend the shadows in. It's probably a wee bit pink, so what I need to do is make it slightly more purpley, violet coloured. And I'm just diving into my Richard McKinney box because this is very good. Lots of quite nice neutrals in here, and they just slide on so beautifully. So this is going to help to add a little bit more detail and variation and extra dimension to these mountain areas. I don't want to get too fixated on it, but I do want to take some of that colour and just drop it down here into the mountain area. It gets a little bit darker over here, so I'm going in with a darker tone. darker shade. I don't know whether I'm a bit dyslexic or not, but I find some words hard to grasp. I know what a tone and a shade and a tint is, but I do find that when I'm engrossed in doing something like this and talking, I'll often forget the right word and use the wrong one. So I do know what they mean, folks. I just don't always have them at my tongue tip. So I'm putting in just a few little extra marks there to give some definition to those mountains, that mountain range. I'm going to go even darker now, and down here in the valley, I will just add some darker marks there. You can see how those shadows are progressing there. We've got a nice shadowed side of the mountain. We've got a little bit of some little suggestions there of much deeper, darker shadows. I'm taking it across into this area as well now. And then I've got to put a little waterfall, or possibly a glacier coming down there, but I think it's a waterfall. Just running some of these dark shadows up into this area. And then I need to add a little bit of that dark into my reflections again. And then these hills are going to be reflected down here too. But you can't really see them because of this headland that's going to be in the way, and that's really what's going to be reflected. There'll be a tiny bit of this mountain coming up into here. So what I'm doing is just adding in a little touch there of some of those mountain colours in the reflections. So that we get a complete range of the colours in there, and then they'll be pulled and covered a little bit by this dark area there when it comes. So just making it a slightly mountain shaped to reflect that, and then it gets that whole blurred look again. That's all getting blurred in there as well, that bit of the mountain. So it starts to blend in with the clouds there. And here's the mountain coming down here, which is the reflection of that one. And the finger just keeps it all nice and soft, which is what we want. The reflections do not have hard edges. We don't want them to have hard edges. That's most of the background done. Oh, I had that little bit of a waterfall-y thing coming down here, just a suggestion of it. And there it comes down there. And I don't really think I want to put any more detail in the background there. That's really pretty much going to stay as it is, and maybe I'll crisp up some edges later, but that's pretty much it. So now back in here is the river, and it's reflecting the sky up there. So I want those lighter colours back in there. And it's quite light. The further you go back, the lighter it is there. And I'm just placing those in horizontal strokes there, and then I'll add in a bit more colour. Make it a little bit bluer blue. No, that's too blue. Let's pull one out of here. That'll do. Come on. Bar humbug. Where'd you go on? Yeah, so I don't want it to be as bright here as it is here. I'm putting a little bit of that colour in, but it's going over a paler blue, so it's coming out paler there. If I want to knock it back again, I just go in with the other blue. It's a bright blue, but it's a light bright blue. So that's the river twisting around there. And that comes forward, as it starts to come forward, it gets a bit more of the colour in it. And then we're going to have another bit where we're getting reflections from the mountains. So we're not getting reflections back there because it's moving a little bit and it's broken up a bit and it's reflecting the sky. So I'm getting more of the sky reflections, but now this bit's stiller as it comes around that deep corner, and what I need to do is put in some of the mountain reflections there. So in with a bit of the blue, purpley colours, and it's picking up a bit of the greens from in there, so I'm putting in a bit of green as well. Just adding a bit of that green in there. Giving it the little jabby treatment. I don't really want that. You can't see that green. It's the deeper dark greens you can see. Oh, don't break them. Very precious. We don't want to break the Terry Ludwigs, do we? So that again gets pulled down. And this one, I'm just going to swipe across. Because it's not really so much the reflections coming down as the sky colour hitting the top of the water there, because it's a little bit ruffled. So now I've got reflections, and then across here there's another bit of the sky coloured area where the water's rippled again, and you just pull it across and you can see it catches on some of the areas and not on others. So you end up with this section here which is smooth and reflections, and then another section which is just a bit rippled and showing that. So we're building it up in layers as we go. Now I'm going to put in that far headland there and then drop some of those darker reflections down into it. This is all a bank across here, and that's going to be very loosely put in. We're going to take a break while I go and wash my filthy hands. Just zoom us in so you can see what's happening. A bit closer in. That's looking quite nice already, isn't it? Let's put in the headlands there. So what we need is a deep dark green for these tree bits here. And I'm just putting the edges along there to define it for me first. And there's a little bit of a bank there which the greens sort of come down to and then finish at. And these are just the trees, so I'm just using the dark green to put in the little branches. And the terry white ludwigs, because they're square, are very nice to use for this kind of thing, because you can just use the square tip to put in those lateral branches. Again, I'm not paying particular, worrying too much about getting it exactly right here. I'm looking vaguely for where the tops of the trees are going and then judging everything else from there. So I'm judging the tops of the trees against the mountains there, and then the rest of the trees relative to the tallest tree that I've put in there. So this part of the valley is in shadow. We're up in the mountains and you lose the sun quite early down in the valley. So they're very dark. I'm just putting little bits of the trees coming through there. That's one headland. Then the other headland comes out here. And that's quite dark all the way out, and then the trees start coming up in blocks, like so. And you can see bits of the river behind it. Not so much there because that's quite a bit of bank there. So we'll cover that all in with the greens, purpley green, and then again these trees are going up here along the bank. And we'll put the little bits of foliage in by just jiggling our edge of the pastel across the paper, left to right, to simulate the branches of the trees. A little bit wider as we get down to the base. I just keep turning it around so that I keep a nice sharp edge. If I run out of nice sharp edges, I'll just have to snap the pastel again, which I definitely encourage you to do with your new pastels. Don't stay precious with them. They're made to be broken, basically, is my philosophy with pastels. They're the two headlands have gone in quite quickly. What I need to do is then drop some of that colour down into the reflections. Sometimes your brain tells you things shouldn't be as long as they are in reflections. Don't listen to your brain. Just trust what you see. Now, the skill builders this month are focusing on reflections, and I'll be talking about painting what you see and not worrying too much about the maths or physics. There are lots of things out there you could read that will tell you why they look a certain way. It's all to do with where you're standing in relation to your viewpoint, and that determines how long they are. But you don't need to go into that, because what you need to do is to trust your eyes and trust what you're seeing. Over here we've got that very dark reflection coming down from that, And it's just going over here into this little area of sort of a backwater there. I'm going to drop those a little bit further down, and then they're going to get somewhat obscured possibly by where I put this bit of the headland in there. So they went in very quickly, and that painting's coming along really well. I need to just do a little bit more work along the bank there. So I'm going to add in very dark, some little bits of very dark colour in there, in the bank. Possibly a few bits of the darker colour in amongst the pines, so they've got a little bit of variety. Their trunks might be slightly darker. And again over here I'm just going to add a little bit of the darker in there for a little bit of variety. A little bit of a dark in some of those trunks. And there we've got a little bit of variety in our trees, and not all just the one colour. Here on the bank, it's just some sort of sandy coloured gravelly stuff. I'll add a little bit in over here. There's quite a lot of it here underneath the bank where it's been cut into by the river. And then there'll be some more of it over here, which is the edge of the river. And I'll be working some of those shadows, I keep calling them shadows, reflections, into this area because there'll be little puddles in there along the edge of the water. There's a sort of bank up here, so I'm just putting in a few grasses to remind me I want to do something with that. And there's a few shrubs coming up here, so I'm just going to put those in now. A little bit of greenery along the edge of the bank. Some suggestions there of greenery, a little bit of suggestion coming up there. Because the bank leads down to the river. And a little bit greener, brighter areas on those as well. So they've got a little bit of contrast. A few patches have been caught by the afternoon sun. I'm actually going to forget that corner for the moment because I really need to put some more reflections in before I can do that. So I'm actually going to wipe it out because what I want to do there is put a bit more of the sky in and a bit more of the mountain above it. This one, so I'm putting a little bit of that reflection in as well. So a bit of the pinky colours from that. And then I'm going to do the whole swipe down again. A little bit of that swipe across with that one. Then down. Because that's a bit of still water and it's sort of flat and going back into there. And there's a little rim of ruffled water there coming across it in a couple of spots. Just ruffling the surface of those reflections. I'm going in here again and just pulling those down. You've got to be careful when you've got the really darks there. You pull them down with your finger and then you just go and dirty up all this lovely reflections, light reflections that you had there. So just be very careful when you're pulling things around with your fingers that you're not messing up the area that you want to see. Now, I'm going to put a couple more little lines of the sky colour coming through there. That one actually. Just where the reflections are slightly broken up, and that is what gives you the sense that there is a surface to the river there. You want to have some of that reflection broken up a bit. That one just needs to be a little bit. Just changing it slightly as I go. That reflection out there is a bit bluer than I've got it. So I'm looking for something a wee bit bluer to pull it down, make that a bit bluer, and then just pull a little bit of that across. Okay, so I'm establishing the surface plane of it. I need to get this out here a little bit, and that has got a bit of green grass on it too, so that's coming out into the river there, catching a few little bits of it up there. That's wrong there, so I'm just going to go in and fix that in a minute, but that's the bottom of that's the bank coming down, and that little bit there needs to be fixed up. It's just going to get taken out. Do those mountain reflections. And then a little bit of that bank can come down. Just a touch of that is going to be reflected in there. A few little bits pulled down from there. And I want the bank to have a nice sort of edge along here where the water meets it. And it's going to have a little bit of a dark colour of that one, so I'm just choosing a darker brown colour. And that's going to just reflect a little bit into the water at the edge there. And again, I'm just giving a little blend there. And a bit of now here, this is where you can see it angles back the opposite direction. So if it's angling down that way, it's going to angle back there. So there's a little bit of angling going on here, just for those bits of reflections. So I've got a little bit of that reflected. And I would like to just delineate that a little bit. What I'm going to do is put a few of those little areas of the surface getting caught by a bit of light. Just a few ripple lines across there. And there might even be, say, a little stump or something in the river, a little rock in the river there. that then causes the water to come around it and disrupt the reflection a bit there. You can see how that happens sometimes. I need to make that rock a little bit more believable in a moment, but that's just giving another sort of added dimension to it. A bit of a ripple in the river. And around the edge here, there are going to be little pools of water along the edges there. So I'm just putting little pockets of the water. That's reflecting the sky in the edge there. So just a few of those. Giving them a little dab with my finger to make them lie nice and flat and horizontal. That's giving me a little bit of some reflections in there. That bank needs to have a few different colours in it, so I'm putting a whole lot of and just making some little irregularities along the water's edge there where some of the reflections are carried on into that. So there's the water's edge. I don't like where I've put that because it's flowing out the corner. That's a big no-no, isn't it? What I'm going to do is just tidy up the rock slightly. I need to give it a tiny bit of darkness on this side. There's my rock. And I'm going to flow around it. And now I'm going to put a bit more of the foliage in here, so maybe it's going to have something growing up out of there. The branches growing across, and then I'll put in a bit of foliage coming out of there to stop everything going out of the corner. There'll be some bits of greenery coming down towards the riverbank there too. And get something a bit darker back there as well, just to add a bit of a frame for the whole thing. I need to put in some grasses here just to lighten up that area. And I'm just using some of the Terry Ludwigs in very pale, so it looks like there's some sun that's popping their heads out. A few there. There'll be darker ones, of course, as well, going back into that mass. So I'll put in a few darks. not very happy with that area there. I'm totally unhappy with that area there. Really, really unhappy with it. I couldn't be more unhappy with it, so I'm going to try and get rid of it and see if I can fix it. I'll give it a bit of a scrub out. I think what I might do is just make that not so big, and then I can cope with it. And what I'll do is drop in a bit more of the mountain there. Mountain going in, all down there. And a bit of the blue sky. Clean off my finger, give that a little bit of a blend. And I'm actually blending this one up so I blend it into the dark instead of the dark down into it, and then I've got less chance of ruining it. And then back in with the dark reflections. Just want to make that stand of trees a little bit bigger there and fuller, so I can make that a little bit deeper and fuller there. And then I've got to have some little branches showing them as well. And I don't want those to be too crisp and sharp, so I'm just going to dab at them with my finger to make them a little bit softer. I don't want to pull them down, but I don't want them to be so clear, so just a little dab with my finger helps with that. And I'm going to add in some more of this bank in here, raking it up a little bit. That's the device I'll use down the corner here, a bit of the shoreline, breaking it up a bit. And perhaps just going. Very easy to erase it though. And that's just about it. I need to crisp up the edges there, and I'm going to just take a pencil to do that. I'm using coloured pencils to actually crisp up some of those little areas along here. I know you've probably tried pastel pencils, but coloured pencils work quite well too. And I'm crisping up the edges. and maybe a little bit around the edge of the mountain there, just a few. Few lines there. Which will just get my last little bits of shape in. So there we have it, the Athabasca River near Jasper with the reflections. Hope you enjoyed that demo and that you have a go yourself, and post them on the community page. Doesn't have to be this reflection one, but just a painting with reflections. It'd be really lovely to see how you get along. Remember, there's a couple of school builders coming up. There'll be 3 school builders this month, and they'll be helping you focus on different aspects of painting reflections. I really enjoyed this painting, and I may even do it in a really big one eventually. So now what I'm going to do is just store it. So I've taped it to the back of a piece of core flute. You can use foam core, core flute, whatever. I have a little bit of glassine paper, which is just that lovely smooth paper, which I taped over it. Then I have a mat board here, which I've taped some tiny pieces of mat board around so that it makes the little gap between them. And that's how I'll store the painting in an acid-free storage bag, one of those crystal clear bags. Just popping it, it's got stuck there on the tape. And this just keeps everything nice and safe. There it is, all sealed up. Nothing can get into it, no moisture. It's not going to get smudged because it's got the glassine on it. And I can just store it away until I want to take it down to the gallery. Stay tuned for the acrylic painting lesson coming up this month. And that's going to be, for those of you who are doing acrylics and pastel, and that's going to be the boat on the river reflections that that you all voted for. So that will be coming up towards the end of the month. I've also got another acrylic, large acrylic simple seascape coming up that I wanted to show you how to do a lovely dramatic, luscious seascape. That's very simple if you're just starting out in acrylics. Hope you can join me for those. See you later. Bye for now.